Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's discussion of the collapse of the ceasefire in Gaza. I'm Blaise Mishtal, JINSA's Vice President for Policy, and I'm pleased to be joined by two of my colleagues from Israel, JINSA Distinguished Fellow and former Israeli National Security Advisor, IDF Major General Yaakov Amidror, and from just down the hall here in DC, the Randi and Charles Wax Senior Fellow at JINSA, John Hanna. Thank you both for being with us this afternoon. General Amidror, I wanted to start with you. After a little more than 2 months of ceasefire in Gaza on Monday, or I guess early Tuesday morning, Israel resumed operations against Hamas. Can you tell us a little bit about both what led to that decision and what the operations are?
Yes, the idea of the ceasefire was not the ceasefire itself. It was a time to negotiate with Hamas about the release of more hostages. We don't know how many live Israelis are still in their hands. The intelligence has some numbers. But what we wanted to achieve is an agreement about the period during which Hamas will release the hostages. What we learned through the 2 months of the negotiations, that this is not the intention of Hamas. They want to achieve a total withdrawal of the IDF from Gaza, and with no any plan for the future. The meaning of that is to allow Hamas to rebuild itself in Gaza without having any excuse or a reason to believe that they will not do it. And the decision here was after we understood that there is no any intention of Hamas to release the hostages, and we were ready to extend the stage that we had been in, so we will have more time to negotiate. They didn't agree. And the absurd situation in which we are limiting our efforts on our steps inside Gaza, at the same time we are not getting any hostages out, was something that we thought it's a big mistake, and this is why the operation in Gaza was resumed. The purpose is to put pressure on Hamas. It was a very intensive air operation during the first 24 hours, in which we killed, according to the Palestinians, 400 people, and almost double of people had been hurt, injured. We attacked only terror facilities. We don't know how many of the 400 are civilians, how many of them are terrorists. But from our point of view, the question about the civilians should be applied to Hamas, why Hamas decided to put itself within the civilians and to fight from within the civilians. When we saw that that is not moving Hamas to any more positive position, we entered with ground forces. Now it is about 3 locations, one in the center, Netzarim corridor, one in the north west part of the Gaza Strip, and one in Rafah in Shabura area. So we are holding areas in 3 places along the Gaza Strip. And if that does not bring the Hamas into negotiations with good faith, you will see more ground forces going in, and the purpose at the end will be to eliminate Hamas totally. Look, we are in the operation for 5 days. We bombed the street, the Hamas facilities strongly. up till now, they succeeded to launch into Israel, if I'm not mistaken, 3 missiles, that's all. I mean, it's another, although to say Hamas, the IDF didn't succeed, Hamas is strong, blah, 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 blah. Yes, Hamas is strong inside the Gaza Strip. They recruited many young people with Kalashnikov and RPGs, and they are the strongest force inside Gaza Strip. And no one can enter, and for taking control of the human aid, Hamas is strong enough to control it. But they are not relevant as an organization that can attack Israel. After 4 days, what they succeeded to provide is only 3 or 4 missiles, that's all. So we have to move to the next stage, in which we have to smash them to the level in which they're not relevant inside Gaza Strip. That will take a year to kill them all, to identify all the tunnels that still exist, to blow them as well. But you can see from the reaction of Hamas in the first week of the operation that they are not relevant as a threat to Israel. They cannot make any raid into Israel. They cannot launch missiles into Israel. They cannot provide new weapon systems to the people that had been recruited. They don't have the ability to produce it inside Gaza Strip, and they cannot smuggle it in from the Sinai. We are controlling the Philadelphia corridor. So it's totally another situation. And I think that people don't grasp the big change which is now relating to Gaza. Yes, Hamas is still controlling the Gaza Strip, but Hamas is not relevant as a threat to Israel. And what Israel has to do is to go to the next stage in which it will not be relevant inside the Gaza Strip as well. So this is relating to the Gaza Strip operation. We are just in the beginning. We need, if we want to eliminate Hamas inside, we need big number of units to go into Gaza. It's a slow process. We don't rush anywhere. We have all the time to do it. We have to do it cautiously and not to make mistakes, and not in the tactical level and not the operational level. But we are very determined, if this time Hamas does not have kind of a fair negotiations about releasing the hostages, we will do whatever is needed to eliminate its capability to the level in which it is not relevant in Gaza Strip as well.
So if I could just ask, General, because you started by saying that Hamas's goal with the original deal was to force Israel to withdraw from Gaza, and suggested that was unacceptable. But hadn't Israel agreed within the framework of that deal that there would be a phase 2 in which Israel would withdraw from Gaza in exchange for the return of Israeli soldiers that were being held hostage? Wasn't that part of the deal?
No, it was agreed that would be negotiations about this stage. And we had negotiations, and the Americans put two offers on the table, 2 suggestions on the table. Both of them had been refused by Hamas. So we were in a negotiation, very extensive negotiations, in Doha, in Cairo, with the Egyptians and the Qataris, with the Americans inside, but nothing was achieved. And according to the basic agreement, if nothing was achieved, there is no automatic next stage.
John, let me ask you on what the American view of the collapse of the ceasefire is, the return to fighting in Gaza. Sort of how supportive is the Trump administration of Israel, and how wedded is the Trump administration to the original January 17th deal, which I think, at least in part, they had some hand in helping negotiate along with the Biden folks.
Yeah. I have a slightly different understanding from General Amidror, Blaze. My understanding was more along your lines, which is that there would be a phase one for 42 days. On day 16, negotiations would start for negotiating a phase two, which explicitly called for it would end if they successfully negotiated phase two in an Israeli withdrawal and an end to this phase of the war and the return of all the hostages, remaining hostages in their bodies. And then we would move on to negotiate some third phase about reconstruction. That, of course, was why the deal was so difficult in the beginning and so controversial, because it did seem to put at risk one of Israel's central goals for this war, which was to obviously eliminate Hamas not only as a military force in Gaza, but as a politically relevant and governing force in Gaza as well. There was enormous controversy about that. The prime minister had a very difficult time in his cabinet getting agreement to that. One part of his cabinet actually left the government over the deal. And at least from press reporting, there was another leader, Mr. Smotrich, who said, if you go to phase two and begin negotiating seriously phase two and a possible end to this war, I will probably leave the government as well. Those were the press reports. So I will say that, and I think we were on together, General Amidror and I, at the time that ceasefire was agreed to, right before the President Trump's inauguration. And I have to say that I thought at that point in time, given the role that President Trump and his envoy had played in bringing some level of pressure to bear, both on Israel and Hamas, that we wanted to see this deal that President Biden and President Netanyahu had worked out many months ago. We wanted to see that deal done. The three-stage deal that Biden and Netanyahu had worked out between themselves. I thought at that point in time, President Trump was coming into office with a strategy that he wanted to de-escalate. Israel had smashed Hamas and made it irrelevant as a threat to Israel for the time being, as General Amidor has just described, still a threat to its own people. But for the United States and President Trump, there was going to be a bigger agenda, a different agenda than focusing on Gaza for the moment. And it was going to be some combination of taking down, dismantling the Iranian nuclear program and a big Saudi, U.S., Israel deal on normalization and transforming some kind of new regional security architecture, and of course, Nobel Prizes and whatever might be associated with that. So I thought President Trump was going to be invested in this deal and was going to be bringing pressure to see that each of these phases got negotiated and the hostages were all returned. But that obviously, it changed fairly quickly. Some point in February, with these awful, horrific showcases that Hamas was putting on, its soldiers coming out, parading in front of these rabid crowds, delivering the dead Bebus children, these emaciated men who had been nearly starved to death. I think it clearly had a deep emotional effect on President Trump. He saw it as a huge sign of bad faith by Hamas, and I think he interpreted it as Hamas materially breaching their side of the deal. Therefore, he said, I'm changing the deal. You have to give all these people back now. And if you don't, I'm giving Israel everything it needs and a green light to either continue to negotiate or to restart the war. But it's all on Hamas. The administration has clearly given Israel all the munitions it needs. It says that it's giving Israel 100% backing in terms of whatever it wants to do now in Gaza. So I think for the moment, Israel and the United States are on the same page, and we'll see how this Israeli military operation progresses. But I have to admit, I was wrong. I thought President Trump would work once he had pressured Israel initially to agree to this deal, that he would work then to see it fulfilled, the ceasefire, and Gaza put on the back burner in order to pursue a somewhat different agenda. But here we are.
General Amidror, can you give us a sense of what sort of new deal Israel is looking for, what sort of terms it's demanding from Hamas in order to
it's very
end
clear.
this?
It's very clear to release the hostages. It's a very short one and very clear one. That's what we want. We are not ready to go again for the long and humiliating process in which they are releasing them one by one and making all the ceremonies and using it against the hostages themselves. As you know, they brought 3 hostages to see how their friends are released, just to give them the well understanding that they don't. I mean, these are atrocities that cannot be continued. One of the hostages spoke in the United Nations describing the unbelievable conditions in which he was under the ground, and he lost 30 kilo out of the 74 kilo that he had. I mean, almost 50% of his weight. Only when he got out, he understood that his wife and his daughters had been butchered by Hamas. We don't want Hamas to continue to play with the hostages they have. We have one demand: to release the hostages, and then we are ready to speak about everything. Let's see what will happen. The ceasefire could not be continued.
Would Israel agree to withdraw troops and a permanent end to the conflict in exchange for the return of the hostages, or is the elimination of Hamas and a return to fighting
this
sort of inevitable Hamas, at this point?
Disarming Hamas and the expel of its leadership is a prerequisite to any situation in the future of the Gaza Strip.
After more than 2 months of a ceasefire, is the IDF able to find and hit Hamas targets still relatively easily within Gaza? Have they gone underground or further hidden themselves among the civilians? Is it harder to prosecute the war than it was 2 months ago?
We have the intelligence that we have, and this is not going to be a war in which we will determine the war by intelligence. We will have to go and to fight inside the Gaza Strip to find them and to kill them. That is not something which is not going to be finished with good intelligence and precise air raids. It's going to be very hard ground forces kind of urban area war.
Defense Minister Katz said that Israel might once again start moving the civilian population in Gaza. Do you have a sense of when that might happen, and would it be back to the Mawasi area, or what are the plans?
It's happening now. We don't want that Palestinians which are not fighting will be hurt by the war. We want them out of the battlefield. It's not the interest of Israel that civilians will be killed. On the contrary, it is the interest of Hamas, because Hamas use it to condemn Israel all around the world. Our interest that as many as possible civilians will be out of the battlefield and will not be part of within the line of fire of both Israel and Hamas. We don't want Palestinians to be killed. We want to kill all those Palestinians which are fighting against the IDF.
Let me ask you both. In addition to the resumption of Israeli operations in Gaza, we had another recent event, which was the U.S. strikes against the Houthis that began a couple of days beforehand. Is there a connection between the two? Is it a coincidence that they happened at more or less the same time?
I don't think that was coordinated between the two states. I think that the change in the policy of Washington towards the Houthis is not connected at all to the decision of Israel to resume the war in Gaza. It is, from the Israeli point of view, it's something that we didn't want to take upon ourselves. We thought that the solving of the Houthi issue should not be taken by Israel. It's international problem. Only 20% of the trade of Israel is going through Bab el-Mandeb. We can manage without it. With a lot of help from the United States of America, we succeeded in the past to intercept, I think, 90% or even more of the projectiles which had been launched towards Israel from Yemen. Yemen is 1,800 kilometers away from Israel. It's a longer distance than Tehran. Sana'a is longer distance than Tehran from Israel. So we thought that we should not take the burden. We bombed twice in Yemen just to show that we can, and we don't. And the Houthis will have to take into consideration launching in missiles into Israel. The meaning will be destruction in Sana'a or in Hodeidah or whatever we decide to do it. But we didn't think for a moment that it is our job. The burden should not be taken by Israel, as I said. But I think that it is easier now for Israel when the Americans are doing that job in Yemen, because the Houthis were very clear that if we resume the war in Gaza, they will launch many missiles and so on towards Israel. And now when they are busy with themselves, of course, their capability is less there for Israel. It is more about what they do. But I think that the significance of this operation is not connected to Gaza at all. It is about the American ability to regain the trust of the countries in the Gulf. America lost it because the previous administration policy towards the Houthis was very soft and was understood in the Gulf and in the Middle East as another example why the Americans cannot be trusted. They're not ready to make what they're supposed to do. Suppose, I mean, the expectation of the Gulf countries. After the attack on Saudi Arabia oil facility, the Saudis were shocked by the fact that America didn't react. And then Aramco is the pillar of Saudi Arabia, and America didn't move even one step. I think that here is the opportunity of the new administration to gain the trust and the legitimacy of the Arab countries in the Gulf. And if America succeeded to eliminate the Houthi threat regarding its launching capability mainly, and of course closing the strait, that will be a huge achievement vis-a-vis the Arab moderate countries, especially in the Gulf. I think that the previous administration didn't look at it in this perspective, but I think it's very important issue to mention and to emphasize, because it is about the future of America in the Middle East, America bringing extension of the Abraham Accord. Can they do it? How much the Saudis will be ready to go with the Americans? How other countries in the region will be ready to join America? For America, this is the test that they should do to bring very good results, to deliver. It's after many years here, the Americans are delivering. And of course, it's very much connected to the ability to achieve what America wants to achieve in Yemen. And indirectly, it is also a very strong hint to the Iranians. Because what happened here is a very interesting situation. Because of the war, the whole strategy of Iran collapsed totally. Many years ago, King Abdullah of Jordan called what he saw on the ground the building of the Shiite crescent in the Middle East. What we called from the Israeli point of view, ring of fire, from the Arab point of view, it was described as the Shiite crescent, which is taking the position of the old crescent, which went from Iraq to Damascus and to the Mediterranean. And here it went from Tehran to Baghdad, Damascus, and the Mediterranean. And it was very Shiite and was a kind of a threat to the Arab Sunni countries. That was broken totally. Hezbollah is not an asset. It's a liability. Hamas is not a threat anymore to Israel. It's a threat inside the Gaza Strip. The Islamic Jihad was almost eliminated. And the Houthis remain as part of this, what we call ring of fire. And if the Americans succeed to cripple it into the level in which they cannot make any harm to Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, and Israel. And yes, they're still making wars inside Yemen, and in Yemen it's a huge problem, but they are not threat. You know, it's a kind of a Hamas situation in which it is very strong in the Gaza Strip, but it's not a threat to Israel. They are controlling Yemen, but they are not harming their neighbors in the vicinity and Israel. If that will be achieved by America, the Iranians will have to ask many questions, many questions about their ability to deliver. And I think that if you look at it from that point of view, it is more important, much more important than the accidental fact that it is at the same week that we resumed the war in Gaza, they decided to make it in Yemen. And it's very helpful from our point of view because we don't have to take care about the promises of the Houthis to resume the launching of the projectiles into Israel if Israel go into Gaza. But it is much more important when you look at it from the Iranian perspective and perspective of the Arab countries in the Gulf.
Well, on this point, let me say to our audience that General Amidror had a great article last week, I believe, on the collapse of Iran's regional strategy, which you can find on our website at JINSA.org. But John, let me ask you to chime in on the sort of the coincidence of the U.S. strikes on the Houthis and the Israeli Gaza operation. Do you see a connection there, either in planning or an impact, as General Amidror was telling us?
Well, I agree with General Amidror that I don't think these two things were coordinated in any fashion as a kind of two-front attack on the Iranian axis. I do think the result is the first time in at least my memory that you have both Israel and the United States at the same time engaged in concerted military action to degrade and hopefully destroy elements of Iran's ring of fire. And presumably that further weakening of the Iranian axis does make anything you want to do to get Iran to stop that nuclear program. Hopefully it makes it easier to accomplish that objective, which I think should be our number one objective for everybody. If the path to Tehran's nuclear program is through Sana, great. I hope so. I hope that's the case. My own preference would have been to deal for a president who came into office saying he really wants to stay out of wars, he wants to avoid them, he wants to make peace. I'm not sure how many bites at the apple he's going to get for major military operations in the Middle East. I would have chosen the Iranian nuclear program and as a more important objective for the United States. And then if we want to go back and the Houthis are continuing to make problem, it's a smaller problem than it would have been with Iran still very much in the picture. But they've chosen to go after the Houthis. I think it's entirely legitimate, necessary that the United States and the American Navy be able to protect freedom of the seas. I think it's obviously a very high priority for President Trump. The thought that this ragtag group of rebels for more than a year could be firing on American naval ships, the greatest navy in the world, and I think was just intolerable for him. So I think if you can get the job done and suppress and stop all of this fire and reopen the Red Sea to traffic, that would be terrific. But I'm not sure it's a very easy task. I hope we have the kind of intelligence. I hope we have the rules of engagement. I don't know if it can only be done from the air and from the sea. I don't know if we have capable allies on the ground to move against the Houthis. I hope we have all the leadership targets that we need to essentially decapitate and take out the vast majority of their stores of missiles. They fired 2 missiles at Israel already. I don't know how many arrows Israel has, but all of those are quite valuable, obviously, particularly if we're looking at an Iran scenario in the coming months. So this is kind of the path we're on. Israel's going to, as General Amidror said, might be in Gaza for a year. We haven't even talked about what that looks like. I think you hear a lot of talk about a potential IDF. Not this time, it's not going to be raids in and out, taking a city, killing Hamas, leaving that city, going somewhere else. It's going to look more like a potential occupation by the IDF, taking control of humanitarian aid, creating no-go zones in certain parts of Gaza where it will be an area where no aid goes in, and you're killing all of the people there, the Hamas people there. So it looks like it could be a different operation and quite manpower intensive. The United States hopefully doesn't get bogged down for the next few months or even longer inside of Yemen, and that we'll take care of these things and be able to move together against the Iranian priority. So I see some hazards, some risks here. I'm not sure I would have advised exactly what's happening here from an American standpoint. But now that we're in it, I think we have to do everything we can to succeed. And on the Yemen operation, succeed fairly quickly, because as the president said yesterday, if we believe it, he's given Iran 2 months to conclude a nuclear deal, as I understood it, not to enter a negotiation that could drag on for months, but to actually conclude a deal. So that doesn't give us much time. I don't think any negotiation to dismantle Iran's nuclear ambitions can be achieved in that short a time. So then you're looking at what the president has repeatedly threatened, which is that between Iran having the chance to have a nuclear weapon and a military strike, he's going to be prepared to use military force to stop the Iranian program. So that's not very far away. And I think we're going to need, most of the capability we have to look at that problem and not make sure we're not diverting too many of our resources to the Red Sea, which is an important challenge, but not nearly as important right now, urgently, as the Iranian nuclear program.
Let me ask you about another timing issue, John. You mentioned the letter that President Trump sent to Iran's supreme leader, which apparently does have this 2-month deadline that you mentioned. Do we know when exactly that was delivered to the Iranians? And is there a coincidence between the delivery of that letter and the start of the U.S. offensive against the Houthis? Do we think there's a connection between those two?
I don't know. I tend not to think so. I know a lot of people do want to impose this sense of three-dimensional chess that President Trump is playing. I'm not sure I necessarily have a lot of evidence for that. He actually spoke about his letter to the Supreme Leader days before. Apparently, they put it in. Steve Witkoff put it in the hands of the Emiratis, and they had one of their top diplomats, Mr. Gargash, go off to Tehran and deliver it, I believe, to the foreign minister in Iran, and at which point the Supreme Leader and others have begun to give mixed signals commenting on it, lots of threats in it, but maybe some opportunities, apparently. We'll see. The Iranians inevitably will play for time. You mentioned something, Blaze, about the connections. One connection to the Iran and Houthi situation is that the president has actually made it explicit. It's not even a hint to the Iranians that you guys are the primary sponsors and backers of these Houthis. You give them all the weapons. You help them cause this havoc that they're causing. You're helping them fire on American ships. If that continues, every single missile they send, we're going to hold you in Iran accountable. So it better stop. The Houthis are continuing to fire. So, whether the president is now going to follow through on that quickly with the Iranians or simply keep this limited to an American Houthi conflict, we'll have to see. But whether it's by design or by accident, all of these things are going to eventually come together, and presumably they come together in one way or another, a negotiation or through a military action against the Iranian nuclear program.
And now we have word that an Israeli delegation is coming to Washington next week, presumably to have supposedly strategic level talks on Iran and potential negotiations with them. Do we know any more about what will be on the docket or what the intent of these meetings would be?
I don't. I know it's part of, I think they're billing it as part of the regular twice a year dialogues, strategic dialogues that the United States and Israel have. They had two in 2024. Now this is the first one with the Trump administration, led by the Strategic Affairs Minister, Ron Dermer, and the National Security Advisor, Mr. Hanegbi, but they'll have other people with them. And to the best of my understanding, it's going to be focused certainly on the Iranian issue. I'm not sure Gaza and the hostage question will necessarily be part of it, but I assume Iran is going to be the primary thing that people are talking about.
Any insights, General Amidror?
I don't have any insight. No question that the Iranian issue is the main issue in Washington and for sure in Jerusalem. And more than one meeting was taken place in this attempt to coordinate the approach of both countries. At the end, if after the president put kind of a line by declaring that should be achieved within 2 months, it is clear that it is very close. It's not about the 98 issue. It's something which is very and close, and the coordination between the two states is very close.
Well, let me encourage our audience, if they have any questions for either General Amidror or John, to submit them using the Q&A feature. If you type out your question, I'll pose it to them. But before we get to audience questions, General Amidror, let me turn just briefly to the other fronts that have been quiet, but we've seen Israeli activity in Lebanon, striking targets as far north as the Bekaa Valley in recent days. What's happening in Lebanon?
We are determined to enforce the agreement which had been signed with a very important side letter agreed with the Americans, meaning that every attempt by Hezbollah to rebuild its capability, including going into how to call it, reuse facilities which had been destroyed or blown by the Air Force during the intensive operation, will not let Hezbollah to go back to those places and to renew it, to reuse it, sorry. And whenever we identify any commander of Hezbollah going into the south, he will be eliminated immediately, because according to the agreement, Hezbollah should not be in the south. So in the south, we will not let anyone that we know about to go to the south and to move from one place to another. He will be killed. In north of the Litani or north of the grid line, only if we find Hezbollah doing something that might be understood as a new preparation for rearming itself. And we are very determined that that will not happen. In a way, we are using the fact that Hezbollah is in a very sensitive situation, losing Syria as the backing of Hezbollah, the place from which he got munition, weapon systems, money, support. That was the bridge to Iran and the bridge for the Iranians into Lebanon. All that was lost. And Hezbollah is in a very delicate situation. Without the land bridge, the Iranians cannot bring new materials into Lebanon. They can bring money in suitcases by flying directly or indirectly from Iran, but they cannot bring weapon systems, they cannot bring munition, and so on and so forth. And we know that the economic pressure on Hezbollah is huge. The Shiites, which lost many of their properties, buildings, mosques, whatever, they are demanding the money which was promised by the Iranians, and the Iranians don't have the easy ability to do it, and they try to bring cash through the airport. The Americans are putting huge pressure on banks in Lebanon. So from the military point of view, and from the connection between Hezbollah and its popular base, they are in a very problematic situation, and think that they might assess that in the future, the Sunnis of Lebanon will coordinate a pressure on Hezbollah with the Sunni of Damascus. The Sunnis of Damascus have a huge, how to call it, bad memory about the way that they'd been butchered by Hezbollah in the past. So, I mean, for Hezbollah, it's a very sensitive time. And we are using it, we are exploiting it. And we don't want Hamas to rebuild its military capability. And we are very determined whenever we find something, we expose something to destroy it as early as possible. In some occasions, we are applying to the new system which was built by the Americans. They don't have any facility to act, but at least we don't want to surprise the Americans, and we are very determined not to let Hezbollah to rebuild itself. And we are in a better position because of the situation, much more better position than a year ago.
Les, I think it was interesting just on this point of how much better the situation is. Hezbollah's reaction to Israel restarting the war in Gaza was a lengthy statement of condemnation, appealing to everybody to stop the Israelis, stop the Americans from supporting them, but not a peep about doing anything themselves to somehow get back involved with defending the Palestinians. So because they can't do it, they obviously are completely incapable because of what Israel did to them. And I think it just goes to underscore the point that if and when the Iran contingency emerges, Israel has now made both Hezbollah retaliation and any effective Hamas retaliation on Israel for any strike against Iran irrelevant at this point in time, which is a huge, huge change in the strategic equation that we obviously need to take advantage of.
Staying with Lebanon just a moment longer, since General Amidror, you mentioned the bad blood and bad memories of the Syrian Sunnis with regards to Hezbollah. We saw recently there was also fighting between the new Syrian regime and Hezbollah across the border. Is that something that you would expect to see more of? Is there going to be more tension between this new Syrian regime and Hezbollah?
Tension for sure. But I think that the new regime in Syria need time to absorb, to consolidate his situation in Syria, and they are not looking now for skirmishes with Hezbollah. Hezbollah try to infiltrate into Syria and to bring for Syria some, I don't know, weapon system that they know somewhere in Syria. It will be a tension, but both sides do not have now any interest to make it a big war. In the future, if and when, and I'm not sure about it, but if the new regime succeed to consolidate and to feel strong inside Syria, we might see kind of coordination between them and the Sunnis in Lebanon, and this is a catastrophic situation for Hezbollah.
If the new Syrian regime is attacking Hezbollah and the enemy of our enemy is our friend, does that make
no.
The new Damascus regime Israel's friend?
In the Middle East, this rule does not exist. The enemy of my enemy might be my enemy.
I have to interject, Blaise, that on the day that you mentioned that Hezbollah and the Hezbollah attacked the border crossing and killed a couple of the new regime soldiers, and the regime hit back and they had a serious dust-up. The same day Hezbollah was attacking the interim regime, Israel was also bombing sites of the interim regime. So Israel and Hezbollah were giving the interim regime a 1-2 punch, which was a great irony.
All right, let me turn to questions from our audience. We have a couple here from Josh Katzen about Israeli operations in Gaza. Let me try to combine these into one. I guess one is about whether the IDF is less constrained about civilian or hostage casualties now and more willing to use air power than ground forces, or whether it's going to enact something like the general's plan, and whether the ultimate goal is to complete the process of making Gaza uninhabitable so that the population will leave.
No, we will keep all the restraints that we had about the hostages and civilians. We are not going to change this rule of engagement, which is very strict in the IDF. The difference will come from the fact that we have now freedom to bring more forces into Gaza. And as a second stage, based on the first one, we have the advantage of facing Hamas, which is not as strong as it was a year ago. So the IDF will be probably stronger with more units, which would be brought into the Gaza Strip, and Hamas is weaker. But we are not going to change the rules of engagement.
Blaise, I think whatever the IDF strategy is going to be, and General Zamir has said it's going to be a different strategy than the one that was pursued by his predecessor, that it sounds like if Israel is forced by Hamas, if Hamas doesn't give up more hostages, return to the negotiating table to give people up, that Israel's going to pursue a much more potentially devastating assault against Hamas. And one has to say that they've got a completely different American administration for whatever it is that they plan to do, whether that's in terms of moving population, restricting humanitarian aid, creating military zones in which the IDF is going to have much more free rules of engagement, and in terms of munitions and the kind of arsenal and stockpiles it has. It sounds like they've got an American administration that is not going to be constantly grading Israel's homework and trying to make tactical arguments about why is it prosecuting the war this way or that way in this place or that place in Gaza. I think Israel and its commanders and its government are going to have a much freer hand to try and get this total victory that they've repeatedly spoken about over the last several months.
Right. Last question, General Amidror from Jimmy Haber. With all of the intelligence, do we know with any specificity where some or all of the hostages are being held?
We have an idea. It's not specific enough to make an effort to release them by force up till now. It might happen tomorrow.
I guess one final question just came in from Stuart Sloan. Is the new strategy in Gaza closer to clear and hold as recommended by U.S. generals?
Yes and no. We don't have we don't have the local forces which had been used by the Americans in Iraq. At the end of the day, we will have to do it by the IDF, and to find someone to cooperate with inside Gaza is not in the cards in the next, I don't know how many months. Even if we succeed to degrade Hamas to the level in which the organization as an organization is not viable. He cannot make the decision to kill all those who are cooperating with the IDF, and it will take a long time to achieve this situation. Only then it will be closer to what the Americans had in mind, because the Americans made a lot of what had been done by cooperations of the locals in West Iran.
Well, General Amidror, John, thank you very much for your time this afternoon and your insights as always. To the audience, thank you for tuning in. Look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you very much, and for the opportunity to speak with you.